The Lego car right here is a scale 1 to 20 model of the Lexus LC500. It is by far the most complicated Lego car I have ever created, and there are free building instructions for it. They are in the description of this video. And in this video I want to really show you just how complicated this car is. And in order to do so, I'm going to do three things. First, I'm going to tell you about the history of this Lego model. Then I'm going to show you the details of it and the crazy building techniques. And for that, I'm going to use another car. So this is the same car, but in some colors of blue. But what's special about this is that it is not completed with bodywork on one side. Instead, I have colored the hinges and brackets and stuff like that so that you can see just how crazy this car is inside. Finally, I'm going to show you the final model here together with the real car so that you can compare the Lego model to the real car and see just how close to the real car it is, and also just how far from the real car it actually is. So all of the beautiful natural curves of the real car are sometimes just impossible to recreate in Lego. And that's why I'm making these comparisons between this car and the real one, so that you can at least have that kind of impression. So let's get started with the history of this model, because I started back in 2017. Because the car came out, I thought I wanted to build that in Lego. I made an attempt and I had to give up. In 2020, I tried again, and this is the result that I had back in 2020. So imagine this without the white and red spots, but completely dark red as the final car, which is using the parts I was using for this one. Well, this is what I built in 2020, and I used pictures and Griddy and measurements using Griddy in order to build and design this car. And this is, it's not even the first version of the car. I mean, whenever I'm building, I'm always building small sketches of the different details. It ends up being a real car. And then I try to improve what I have built. As an example, you can see here a different version of the front. So this is an even earlier version than what you can see right here. This is the one that I actually used in Lego Masters in the introductory video together with Aspen, where I'm driving this on his table. After getting back from Copenhagen, I compared this to the real car and I was simply not satisfied. I was unable to recreate the real details using the tools I had been using. So what I did instead is that I took some rulers, I took some different measurement devices and went to a real car and started measuring. Wrote down all of the measurements in my book, and based on that I could start all over with a new car. This white version here is what I was using as this intermediary car that I was then improving on, and you can see it's pretty close to what I have in the final model. But being an intermediary model, of course, it isn't complete. And as an example here, you can see that I was working a lot on the windscreen. In the version from 2020, I'm using wedge plates. However, they are not pretty in this kind of setup because you can see the dark red parts shine through the windscreen. So I really want to build something using snot techniques for the windscreen instead. And I even have different versions of how I was attempting to achieve that. And with the iterations, I finally ended up with what you see right here. I also have some other discarded pieces here. I was trying with different versions of making the exhaust of the car, and what you see right here is the rear quarter panel. So instead of what you see right there, I was trying with a different version in order to achieve the right shape of the car. So I was trying with different kinds of versions of the car and ended up with what you can see right here. So that is the story of this model, but let's take a close look at the building techniques and the crazy stuff that is going on inside of this version right here. So the car that is split up, let's start with just underneath. So I'm using parts that I've placed at an angle in order to create the sides of the car, of the bodywork that is actually sloping inwards and then outwards again. So this section right here is mounted using a ball joint. And that was quite difficult to align because it has to align up with the rest of the bodywork. So let's just take a look at that. On this side here, you can see this is a crazy angle that it is placed at. Other fun things underneath of the car is that here in the front, we have these quarter parts actually turned at an angle as well. And that is in order to make space for the grille, and where the grille is receding down into this chrome part here below. And when we're looking at the front, all of this is built upside down. So we are using brackets and plates with studs on side in order to turn the direction. And if you're looking at the quarter front panels right here, you can see we have brackets placed on top of bricks with studs on the sides in order to just create these studs that go in funny directions in order to mount the curved sloping pieces here in the corner and make this relatively smooth part of the bodywork. But everything here is really just using special parts. So as an example, these 1x1 round plates, they are they're useful because they can turn in using the bar, but you can also mount on the plate your parts so that it has the right angle compared to what you want to build. And that really gives us the freedom in order to create something like the 1x2 curved piece right here on top of the part of the light assembly. And that is really nice. It's a really good piece to use in order to create those really difficult angles. And as you can see, everything here is just mounted on clips and bars or on brackets because we want to get all of these nice and strange angles. One thing that is a bit odd with the design of the Lexus LC500 is that on top of these teardrop blinkers, well, there you find the main headlight assembly, but the line to the headlight assembly, so the chrome part underneath or dark gray part underneath, is curving inwards to the car and not outwards like you see on normal cars. And then I tried to recreate using this 2x2 plate that is placed on a single stud and then curved these trans parts on top of it at a slight angle. But that's really difficult to recreate. And you can also see in my earlier prototype that I tried with a more conventional headlight, but that doesn't really look like an LC500. This headlight right here looks more like a Lexus RC. So I changed the design quite a lot right there. And then we have the most simple part of the car from a building technique perspective, and that is the hood, because it's just mounted on side of a couple of brackets. Here at the corner of the hoods, again, clips with parts that have bars in order to create this section that you see right here that is also holding the part that is going above the headlights. It's really nice to use these bars on a clip because that allows you to turn it just enough to slope downwards like the real car. Moving on to the center section right here. Well, of course, I'm using a lot of brackets in order to build this section for the doors. And the doors also have some curvature going in the backside, which is why I'm using air links and Technic bricks with holes in order to create the right angles in order to mount those parts. Let's just take a look at the other door for comparison. And you can see this is the parts that I was talking about that are sloping. And on top here we have the window. It is placed at an angle, and that is done using clips and bars, of course, and in order to create this effect that you see right here. Moving on, you can see the rear quarter window, and that is again using this great new piece, the 1x1 plate with a bar mounted on a clip, and then using some brackets in order to get this half plate offset and fun with the rear quarter window. Now that we are here and are destroying this part of the car, check this out. We have a lipstick here from France, and it's being used in order to mount this little plate 1x1 with a clip just at the right angle in order to create this effect you see right here. That is the half plate between the door and the rear intake, and that is simply a 2x2 curved plate that is giving you that effect. If we move on to the, now that it's open here, to the section that is holding the windscreen, you can see the windscreen is extremely thick. And it is extremely thick because I want to build it transparent, but there's not so many transparent pieces in Lego. And that means I had to make sure these pieces are mounted. So they're mounted sideways, and I'm using the jumper plates right here, 2x2 jumper plates, but also 1x2 jumper plates in order to give it this half-placed offset. Another fun building technique you can see right here is that I'm using a combination of brackets and bricks with stud on side in order to build this half-plate offset that you can see I'm using here on the curve or the angle for the windscreen. And finally, I have the wheel holder right here, the 2x2 plate with a wheel holder on the side in order to hold the A-pillar. So that is quite a difficult windscreen, the most complicated I have ever built. And it continues with craziness because the roof here is held by these fun little pieces here, the 1x1 round plate with a sideways bar underneath. I'm doing this because they can be moved a bit back and forth. Well, it allows me to build the roof in the middle, or to mount it so that it has the perfect distance from the windscreen and to the rear window right here. You see? So there's no gap, or almost no gap, to the windscreen, and almost no gap here to the rear window as well. And I think that's enough fun for the middle section of the car. Let's take a look at the rear. So we have the rear window. It's mounted on clips, and I'm using a lot of brackets in order to create this section here. But where it gets really crazy is in the quarter panels. So I'm using these hinges, old style hinges, in order to mount the curved parts right here, because I want to have this half plate offset where it's moving a bit up and then down again, just like on the real car. And that you can achieve by using a combination of how you are hinging it. So I'm using this 1 or 2x2 plate in order to hinge this part here, and I'm using an hinge in order to hinge the hinge right here. It's a bit crazy, but it worked out. And if you move over to the rear of the car, you can see a normal 1x1 plate with a clip inside of a plate with a bar means that we can turn the direction and move half a plate upwards. And that I needed in order to mount this section right here of the car. So that's what you see right there. And moving in, you can see this section right here is mounted at an angle, and that is simply done using the 1x1 brick with a clip and the 1x1 plate with a bar. This section is of course also built sideways, so I'm using some snot parts right there. And most interesting right here is the top, so this little winglet I have in the back, because it has half plate offsetting using the brackets in order to create this rounded shape of it. And if we move it downwards, you can see a rather crazy building technique. That is the 1x5 plate, and then I'm using the 1x1 plate or tile with a bar on top in order to reverse the direction so that I can hold this little bar. Let's do it like this, in order to hold the bracket, and the brackets facing the other direction are holding these cheese slopes in order to hold everything together. And then I'm using, of course, the brackets in order to draw or have this half plate detail of the rear, this gray part there. And they are of course also holding the exhaust in place. And that is how those details are created. So overall, an extremely complicated but also fun car to build. So I hope that if you're going to build your own, that you're going to have a lot of fun with it. And finally, as promised, here you can see the Lego model together with the real car. And as you can see, I have really tried to do my best in order to recreate the creases, the lines and the curvature of the real car and add as much detail as possible. But you can also see that even though I have done my best with the Lego model, there are simply some things that are impossible to recreate. Take as an example the hood. It looks amazingly long on the real car. And if you look at the version I have from 2020, you can see the hood looks longer. And that is simply because it is made using tiles and the shape is not quite correct. The shape is more correct here in the final version. However, since I'm having the studs and since I've added the curvature that it has right here, it doesn't look as long as on the real car. It looks more stubby right here, but the scale is correct. This is exactly how long the hood is. And that is the kind of details or illusions that is possible to create on the real car, but simply not feasible with a Lego model. At least not in this scale. Or maybe you just need a more talented builder. But I spent a lot of time trying to make this model correct, and well, you can see even with my best efforts, there are still a lot of things that maybe doesn't look quite correct. But that's how it is when you're building with Lego. You're trying to recreate something using a very imperfect medium. And that is what I wanted to show you for this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that you want to try out the building instructions, because this is an absolutely crazy build. And well, then I hope to see you next time. That's it for now. Take care.